All right, wow, that's fine. Yeah, okay. Williamson, will you go over the notes from last time, please?
All right, at the close of last time, we ended with, after they did their fact and opinion, we said they don't know how to communicate their thoughts, they can't verbalize their ideas. And that's where we left off, is that we need to figure out how they can express their thoughts, not just in social studies, but in all content areas.
And Rigner, you're going next, right, for math. So, we
you,
also talked about,
Yeah, no problem.
Go Eagles. We had talked about maybe doing more debates. We talked about maybe bringing in Mr. Davis, who doesn't even know yet, but, and things like that, but just talking about different things. So the question is that how are we going to change this to math? So like, how are we going to, what do you want to do? What do you want to do in math, basically, to get them so they can start communicating their thoughts?
I think right now we're working on equations, so a good thing that students tend to have problems with is trying to read a word problem and develop an equation from it. So maybe we, excuse me, we can do something where they get a word problem, they come up with an equation, maybe working partners, and explain why they chose that equation, and then also follow through with answering the question.
make sure we're talking in the microphone.
Can you hear in the back?
No, down the mic, come on.
No? Okay, walk into the mic.
Sing. I've heard you.
You're gonna have to get mine, buddy.
Own it, man, own it.
Check.
There we go.
So if you could just go through that one more time about how we're, and once again, the idea is what stemmed out of the original close reading was the fact and opinion, right? So let's keep that in mind. And students were not able to express their thoughts. So that's the goal, yes?
Yes.
Expressing thoughts? Okay, and applying that to a math classroom, can you just go over that again?
So we're working on equations in math right now, and one of the problems that students have is with word problems and trying to get an equation from the word problem. So what I was thinking, maybe having them work in partners and then trying to come up with an explanation, first how to solve the problem and explain how they got the equation from the word problem. So give them an opportunity to use a lot of different math terminology, explaining, first reading and interpreting a problem, and then coming up with an equation and then explaining why they chose that equation, and then finally solving it and how they solved it.
Does math still use that little T-chart thing? Like I remember ISATs in the past, they used to do like a weird, not a weird, but they used to do a T-chart. I don't know if math
So
still
on
does
the
that.
T-chart, it would
What
be,
and when?
Yeah, like they do the math part and then on the side.
Explain.
Yeah, I
so
was
they
like,
work the
yeah.
problem on the left and explain in words, in writing on the right.
Yeah, I don't know if that's still an ISAT thing.
No, yeah, we could do that. They're familiar with it.
They do it.
I don't use it, but I know that other teachers use it, and they are familiar with it because they try, or they always ask me, do we need a T-chart
Okay.
to explain?
Yeah.
So they're definitely familiar, and it probably would help them organize their thoughts.
Does LA use that at all? Jennifer, Monica?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we explain it, so we can cross over what we're doing at the same time.
They use T-chart often.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's an alternative strategy that we sometimes use in the A in
Right in the microphone, I'm
Can you hear me?
What?
Can you hear me?
Purple.
Light purple.
Try now.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, Click that switch. There you go.
There we go. Okay? Can you hear me? Okay. There's an alternative strategy in LA called QAR, and it's question-answer relationship, and it's almost like a flow chart where you record the question, you record the answer underneath, and then you record how you got to the answer. Did you get to it from going back into the text? Did you get to it from a fact or an opinion or a bias that you might have? And that could connect with the story problem as well. And so they see the flow of information, and they see where the resources that they're pulling from. So I think it clarifies to them whether they're going back into the text, whether it's something that they can go back and prove, or whether it's an opinion or a bias based on something in their knowledge base or in their data.
Okay, I think that could work. I mean, if we're gonna do something like that, I would have to probably see if they're even familiar with that, or Do they ever do that in language arts?
In a roundabout way, not on a particular form.
I use this mostly for English language learners, and there are 4 kinds of questions, but we can only do the first 2, where the question is, you'll find the answer in the story right there, the first one in QAR, and there is a simple answer in the text, or it can be think and search, and that one is like the answer is in different places in the text, and then it's the unspoken answer that the author is implying in the text, author and you, and finally the one based on your own experience. So there are 4 kinds of questions in QAR, and they might be used in any kind of content
So
area.
so apply that to math then, how would that be applied to this particular focus of having students be
math?
able to express their thoughts in math, yes?
Yeah,
In QAR.
in math usually you'll find probably the first 2. There is no
Which are what?
hidden.
Right.
The one that is right there in the problem,
In the
and
problem.
it can be think and search, look around the problem, and which is the data that you want to come up with from the whole problem. It's not only in one spot.
Well, one thing I think that's a good idea, and we can probably give that to them, but my biggest concern would be the explanation.
Yeah.
Because how are they gonna organize that? Because the problem that I get, even having them explain problems in writing, or even just talking verbal, is just that they're having a hard time explaining and using math terminology. They're more of like, I always write back to them, explain like I have no idea what you're talking about. That's what they can't do. They're always explaining using a lot of pronouns, not actually using vocab terms, and so I know what they're saying, because I know what they're supposed to be doing, but I'm trying to get them to go above and beyond that. So that's where I think we've got to focus more of that organization of thoughts and how you communicate that.
What if we start with like a simple, like not a word problem, but not a hard word problem, something basic like how do you find the perimeter of the building? Something that we know they know how to do, but just getting them used to the idea of explaining. And why.
Do they know how to do a criminal building?
Well, something that they know how to do, like even just like, multiplying numbers that, 3-digit numbers. Like I bet kids explaining why they put a 0 in a place together, like sometimes they probably don't even know why they're doing it in math other than it's just a memorized rule. So maybe if we go back to the basics before we start doing complex equation like we were saying.
Well, I don't think it has to be that complex. I could do a pretty simple equation.
Right.
Where they can probably figure it out just reading through the problem once what the equation is. And then to go back and explain how they came up with that equation might be a little bit more difficult. So I don't think we have to keep it, the word problem I can simplify as much as I want to. So I think if we stay with the equations, I feel like they can get a lot out of it. So I think it can help them moving forward, so I would prefer to say.
I think you have 2 important thoughts there, though, that you just mentioned. Ms. Coquino said about the memorized rules. Too often, or a lot of times in math especially, and that's part of it. I mean, yes, they have to memorize certain things, but then when we ask them to explain it back, that's where they have a hard time, the why, and how you got to there. So, and then the organization of thoughts too. Part of them explaining, I think, is first of all, organizing of thoughts. So how do we want to tackle that perhaps, how organizing their thoughts? And I think that, I don't know, tell me what you think, but either in pairs or in small groups, working together to organize their thoughts and then actually presenting that out has to be a part of this. They have to verbalize.
I have another idea.
Okay.
It's not a new one, because actually we keep using old ideas and tweaking them according to what we need. It's called number heads together, numbered heads together.
Numbered heads together. Not a band.
Here comes my ELL expertise. We've been using it for quite a while.
So it's about working in groups. They are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, groups of 4, and they are supposed to answer questions, one or another. First of all, by cooperating, and usually those, because it's true, I'm jumping a little off subject, not all kids talk. And they don't talk because they are shy, because they don't know how to say it, because so they need support. So the group they are working in is the one that supports them, because all the time there will be a talker in the one that tells everything. So the changed part of the numbered heads together is that they have to write down whatever they think they might answer orally, right? And then the teacher calls a number, and they don't know which number. And so for, let's say, 7 groups of 4 kids, number 3 has to give the answer. And among the number 3s, there will always be 3 of them who don't talk. And sometimes we have to be tricky enough and to make sure that we call those kids that we know will never say anything. And the others are going to support the kid. Like, for instance, when he or she gets up, the others say, hey, you say this and this and this, and always the answer has to have a 2 or 3 part. Because the rule of this strategy is like, if somebody said the answer that you wanted to say, you sit down. But if it is one possible answer, you'll see that one gives the answer and the other 6 sit down. They have to prove that they had the same answer if it's written. So
I like that. I think that.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. Numbered heads together. They're in groups of
4 usually.
Okay, so groups of 4. This forces them to have to. Everybody in the
together.
group know what the answer
answer.
and what they're going to say.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Mike, you're going to pull a number or call out number 1, for example, and then whoever the number 1 is, they have to be able to verbalize that.
Mhm.
I like that strategy.
Yeah, and, I'm sorry, and that's the thing that will engage them, but it has to be practiced for weeks and weeks, and if we want to really have a lesson study, they know what's coming, so they know everybody has to give the answer, I think.
Well, sure, I mean, they have to have some practice with that, and even if they practice it for a week, if you incorporate it in for the week, and then they know the strategy by the time, I mean, they have to start it sometime.
I was gonna say, we could use that, well, my idea was, what if we gave the kids a T-chart, like they use in LA, that's already done, the math's done, the explanation's done, but we tell them that one of the explanation steps is not done well, not done right. So that's how we kind of start the scaffold process, or say, okay, in your groups of 4, we can still incorporate this. You guys find the one step that's wrong and fix it, and then be ready, because you're gonna present how to do it. So like, once we know that there's a mistake, or it's not explained well, then there's kind of less pressure on the math part, because we know our kids can do the math, you know, but they don't understand why. So it's gonna force them to explain why without the pressure of doing the math itself. And then we can kind of ease up as the weeks go by, like, okay, leave a step blank, maybe the 3rd step's blank, explain that math part. Because it alleviates the pressure of the math.
For the purpose of our lessons today, though, I think we're getting, when we did social studies, when we ended up, we were huge, and it was a 3-day lesson.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we specifically looking, are we looking for them to be able to verbalize, or just to write down their thoughts and put it out? So
What did you
where
have,
are we at?
you write something down?
From last time?
The purpose of from last time, what the purpose of this was.
We did not come up with an objective, we just said they don't know how to communicate their thoughts. They can't verbalize their ideas, is what we
Okay,
said.
let's go back then, because I think we have to start there and stick with whatever.
They have it in
the
writing,
objective is.
they're
I
gonna
don't
be
think
more
they have it in
confident to, yeah, that's what I'm saying, in
Oh, yeah.
math, like if we do this, if we force them to explain, not just the math part, then if we call them to explain, like Monica's saying, in front of the whole class, they're gonna be more confident, because in their group before they'll have, well, we've changed step 3 to say this, this, and this, and this, we had to add the sides.
But I think this is like 2 weeks after practicing the skill of actually getting it written down.
Okay.
We can watch that, and then a couple weeks come back in, and then see the verbalized part,
Yeah, I
like
think this
make
is
it-
a
first
huge
written.
part of it. I think they really have to understand that. I like that strategy too, because then that forces them to not only search, but explain why they thought that step was wrong. but I can see, or maybe not, what happens if a group says, well, I don't see anything wrong here, the whole group, then where do you go? Then that begs a different
We
question.
need one blank.
Yeah.
Well, we can just leave them with prompts, like this is, kind of leave, you know, what did you call that, where we give it to them and we start taking away the scaffolding, where
Yeah.
we start off half of it and then we kind of leave them with the rest of it, where
Well,
they can figure out.
The other thing, if you could just tell them that, you know, here's a problem, here's how to explain it, and there's a problem with it, find how they can maybe explain it better. What part could they explain better? And maybe they already know that there's something that's not explained quite clearly, so they know they're gonna look for a mistake, and then maybe they can come by it that way.
Mhm.
That was the thing too, if we had prompts, that would probably be better, because if we're gonna do debating and stuff like that, they're gonna need prompts anyways.
So what's our clear objective?
Yeah,
We need
let's
to
come
go
up
back
with
to
that first. What's the objective?
Oh,
We want them to explain why they did something mathematically, like, right? That's the goal. Why did you divide by two?
Well, no, take out the mathematical, because we do find everything.
Oh, more general.
For everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is kind of critical thinking, but we need to be more, you know, much
More,
more.
That's exactly
I mean,
right.
critical thinking is a very huge, general idea, so I think we need to break it down. So if we're gonna say it's critical thinking, what kind of critical thinking?
Yeah, but it's, is it? I don't know if it is
Well,
critical.
I mean, well, is it?
Well,
I don't think that's,
Higher.
well, it's definitely higher level thinking. Well, it could be critical thinking, but the objective, I thought, was to, so that students could express their thoughts in mathematical, in this case, mathematical thinking, but just the idea of expressing thoughts in general, in any subject. That's what we have to remember, that this has to apply, it has to apply across the board, and then we'll tailor it for this math lesson. So it's really about expressing thoughts
And giving the rationale behind it.
yeah.
and expressing rationale. So come up with something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think we got to forget lesson.
Well, see, yeah, and that's okay, that's what comes out of this, like we discussed before, that you're probably gonna find something else that comes out of this lesson study right here.
I also think too, when you do the groups, and however they come up in front and stuff, that, again, going back to the social studies thing, that you have to make sure that they don't have that fear, that they can be wrong and it's gonna be okay.
So it's having something concrete that they've written together would alleviate that
And even if that
initially.
thing is still wrong, it's not the point. The point is that they're still doing that, they're giving that exposure. It's okay to try.
Michael, do you guys do, like an I do, we do, partner do, you do kind of thing in math?
No, I haven't.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, it's
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, so it's what it says, yeah, but we could throw in the partner one, so the ID would be where you model it for them. Okay, then you can do we can put in a partner one where they can do it as a partner, and then you can do where the student individually does it then. Or well, you have to put in where you guys do it as an entire class. So it's I, we, you.
Okay, yeah, so, okay, we do that every day then.
So I think what I hear you say, Jennifer, is to chunk the whole process down from the whole class or from a group of 4 to a partner sort of thing with students, like a think, pair, share.
Yeah, as long as Michael has modeled it. I mean, I think that's what they don't have a lot of.
So you would model it, Michael, and then break the students down into pairs, and they would each think separately and then come together as a pair, talk about it, and then either one of them shares, or both of them share together.
Are we sharing? Do we want to verbalize, or are we just getting it on paper? That's what we don't have
Well,
this clear. We
I
need to
think
decide.
that getting it on paper is definitely important, but I think that we thought expressing their thoughts, being able to verbalize that explanation, and they're gonna be doing both, aren't they? I mean, because we're gonna have them write, so either way we do it, it sounds like what we're saying with the I do, we do, you do, and incorporating the think, pair, share in that process, they're gonna be writing it, right? And they have to write their thinking, and then I think it's important that we use maybe what Monica shared, the numbered heads together, to verbalize it by picking random, making sure that forces them to talk in the groups also. That's another skill that this is also getting at, in working together as a group to come up with one solid definition or explanation. so that everyone, if it's Mariana that's called, then she knows because we've discussed it as a group. And she can verbalize it just as well as any of the four of us can.
Does this have to be all done in one class period though? Cause can this be like
No, I think
a
it's gonna be
ongoing goal?
multiple.
Right, so it's not like they have to get the verbal part done in one day. We can't expect them to pick up on the T-chart, pick up on the group,
Right, I think
and all that, and present it in
No,
one
I think we have
period.
a lot going on here, and I think we have to, if we have the objective, what is the goal, then we will be able to hone in on what exactly we want to see, because when we all go in to watch you, what is that day gonna look like? Like, just like when we went into Conley's room, he had done a day and a half of work before the actual focused observation.
So do we wanna see the first day that he starts this, or do we wanna see after they've already been introduced for a couple days, and then we see the part where you do the group verbal presentation part?
That part, or any part where they do it.
Yeah,
To be able to talk.
I think we want to see them working in groups to come up with an explanation, or with their thoughts, working to get their thoughts on paper, and then being able to express that.
So they would already have been working with Michael for a couple days, whatever, before getting him in with the T-chart thing? So it's not the first time they see it when
No,
they come in?
no, I mean, it's probably gonna be exactly like your lesson, where it's gonna be, introduce it maybe on Monday, and then Tuesday work on it, and then Wednesday work on it, so, it probably will be a three-day lesson for them, but it's worth it.
Do you remember last time we talked about including the students? I think this would be a good point. Some way to, we had talked about including the students before. I think this would be a time where we would do that. So ask them what they would need to be able to express their thoughts or communicate why they don't. And try to help them with some of those fears before we ask them to do this part. So either get a student in here for our next planning session or survey them some portion to get them in.
Okay.
Well, how about expanding our objective to just include generally being able to communicate? And if we were to go back to the very beginning and talk about verbal and nonverbal communication, maybe if we started with the springboard being a nonverbal and doing sort of like a charades game with moods, and have them pick a mood out of a hat or whatever, and then we try and act it out and communicate non-verbally, and then move into the verbal part of the communication.
Good prep idea.
I just want to hear what I've written.
Okay, what do you have? Let's hear it
Okay.
so far.
Of course, it needs fixing. Students will communicate their thoughts both in written form and orally, being able to verbalize to the class their thought process in solving equations. So whatever that last piece is for your classrooms. So want it again, Mariana?
One more time.
Okay. Students will communicate their thoughts both in written form and orally, being able to verbalize to the class their thought process in solving equations, or whatever you have. So we each change that last part.
Okay, so but generally, it's communicating their thoughts both in written form and
So,
orally.
right, they'd be able to write it and then express it to you,
Okay.
and eventually take away that writing piece.
Yes.
That's the objective. Okay, well, let's jump from there now to the assessment piece. How will this be assessed? We've got a lot of thoughts from which we can pull from, a lot of ideas. We can actually start laying out how you're gonna introduce and go through the lesson, but how is this assessed? Let's talk about how are you gonna know that they got it? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, looking at the test, there'll probably be already a test question where they have to explain their answer. So every test that we have,
What kind of test?
just a summative test.
But if we're looking to have them
Right
communicate
away?
their thoughts orally,
So make that.
Okay, well, then-
Yeah.
maybe a pencil paper test is not the
We
right
just do
form.
like a regular exit slip one?
Yeah.
Right out of the door exit slip, like we did in Conley's?
I would say no, the exit slip, just give them more time. I don't think I have enough time to really,
On the exit slip?
yeah. I mean, it was 5 minutes and some classes were less. I mean, it just depended on where we were going, but you kind of got to give them some time to get their thoughts down. Because I think some hurried just to get it down exactly.
Right, and I get that, we can do an exit slip, but I'm also thinking that if we're really trying to assess their ability to, if we're really
Can we
trying to
record
assess
them?
their ability, either that or some kind of a clipboard that you're walking around and listening, And this, you don't have to do it all in one day. I mean, I think the assessment part needs to come over a couple of days maybe, but I almost think you have to understand that. I understood that I was supposed to express verbally my thoughts, and it makes sense what I'm saying,
Could
right?
I also be assessing them when they're just working in their groups?
Yes.
And answer,
I think so.
talk about problem solving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's too.
There's always gonna be kids that are not gonna talk about when you do that. That's a problem with people. There'll be like one person, like you were saying, that's dominant, and the other will just be waiting for the other kids to do the work. What if we did, because you had that projector thing, right?
Mhm.
What if we had like projected that work, whatever problem you gave them, that T thing that was already typed up, let's say, and had the groups come up, and if there's 4 kids, let's do a 4-step problem, I don't know, and each kid has to speak. They'll have a piece of paper with them from before when they did their group work, so if they're not confident, they can just read off what they wrote.
Sure.
Can they do a self-assessment since we're obviously doing this themselves?
How's that?
And more than one.
What is that?
A self-assessment where they see how they're seeing themselves, judge themselves, and then once they do it again, see how they've gotten either better or more comfortable.
Like with the rubric, you give them a rubric and they assess each other.
That's what I was thinking, peer assessment.
Yeah, peer assessment,
Or they can
maybe
do their groups
self-assessment.
with each other, and Michael can make something, what they have to look at.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I like
Okay.
that though.
We're like a
Peer
three-week
assessment.
lesson.
Yeah.
We lost it.
Because that's what we did by assessment class.
Let's go back. I feel like we're getting off the thing again. Like, we want them to be able to explain why they did something, right? First, before they can say it, they have to be able to show it mathematically and explain it, right, on paper? Is that
Right.
agreed?
Right.
So I think like that needs to be the focus. I don't think we should talk about the verbal part, if we can't get them to write it down first.
Yes, that's
No.
the.
I think we're biting off too much.
No, I kind of agree. If they can write it, then they can just read what they write. So if we can get them the part where they can actually write it down, you know, and then whether or not they read it, I mean,
I think they should verbalize it.
Yes,
Yeah, I agree with the have
I
on
don't
paper.
agree them reading. They have some notes, they can't even write complete sentences, but they have to be able to say it. That's the whole.
Yeah, remember, this is not gonna be perfect right now, baby
No,
steps
it
is
was.
the key, right?
Yeah,
I'm not
it-
used to
that's why
doing
you
this.
practice a
And
lot.
to build the confidence, the group piece is important, that we're all working together to come up with something, get it on paper, and then we tackle the reading it in front of the class. Because I think if it's on paper, then they verbalize it amongst their group, so let's keep that in mind too. We've got about 5 more minutes and then we'll wrap this up. So even if we don't finish the actual outline of the lesson right now, let's just wrap it up in about 5 minutes or less.
I like what Karen said though about students and their self-assessment. And I think going into the process, one of our real strong competing goals is how students communicate, and if they're aware of whether that's a strength or weakness, and setting a goal for themselves within that process. So if we were to have a rubric, and before we started with the verbalization process, to have them record how they feel that they are as communicators, and then at the end of the process, have them go back and record how they've grown or how they haven't, and maybe a further goal that they have for themselves. So I like that.
Okay, so that can be a part of it, we can add into eventually.
I got one last idea.
Yeah.
No, I like that idea, but what if we did it a step further and let's say, so they come back the next day, you guys come in and observe the lesson, or maybe you observe this lesson, but where they maybe will answer their own problem by themselves, explain it, and then present it in their groups that they had groups before. And then each group member will fill out a rubric for that person.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that
Yeah,
we will
that's-
assess it
So
and
it's
then,
not.
Not your,
Yeah.
yeah. I like
Michael,
that
can you
one.
do that one more time?
We're getting
So-
I didn't write it down, I just thought we were.
the next day they come into class and they all have one problem to work on that's not the same for their group members. So they'll figure out the problem,
Everybody has a different. problem.
explain it, and then be able to explain how they came to their answer with their own group members.
with their group,
Yeah,
and they assess each other.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
So you're grading on the person's favorite
This
pieces.
is peer.
And
Creating another-
are we giving them some way to evaluate each other, some kind of guide?
Yeah, you can provide me with a rubric.
Thanks, John.
Do we, going back to the groups, do you think numbering them, just like pick a number, is a good idea?
Oh, like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Or do you think we need to put them in groups? I think your group, I think how they're grouped is gonna determine a lot out of this.
So predetermined or,
Yeah, like you figure it out,
Random.
or you can do it random and see what happens. Maybe do one class random and
In
another class
science,
not.
I learned pick groups, which I never did as a seventh grade teacher, because we dissect a lot, Mr. Rupp. It's good to let them pick their group sometimes, because then they're already motivated, because they want to be with that person. So that, like, their comfort level will be okay, maybe for the first time, some pick their groups, because if you make them, the first time they're gonna be awkward, and.
I think over the course of a week or the next couple of weeks, before, whatever date we set for this, I think it would be a good idea to do that, to do some, let them pick their own groups. I think you do some, like, on a stick or something, so it's random, and then you also, giving them, putting them in the groups of your choosing, just so they get used to being in varied groups and working with different groups of students. So, well, let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts for now? Continue Thursday?
Yeah, we'll iron out the details.
Iron out the details and then set a date. All right, thank you, Lobos.